by your name and purchase.
Now it's recording. So
Yes.
fiscal responsibilities of the grant. So thank you, Amy. So this is a supplement, not supplant grant. So that's the first thing with adult education that's really important to understand is AFLA section 241A is funds made available under adult education and literacy activities under this title shall supplement, not supplant any other state or local public funds expended for adult education and literacy activities. So basically, when we come in and we give you a grant, we're there to supplement any other grant funding that you have. We can't supplant it. So if you have other adult education or you have other grants that are providing this funding and you get this funding on top of that, you can't take that other funding away. We're there to supplement. So we're there to act as a tool that works in conjunction. You can't just automatically say, oh, we've got this money, now we can take this other money and put it towards something else. So that's supplanting it, and that's against these regulations that we cannot do. So that's important to understand about adult education in this particular grant. Oh, look, in other words, federal funds may not be used to pay for services, staff, programs, or materials that would otherwise be paid with state or local funds. So we can't take this and just be like, hey, these supplies, we can now use these federal funds and state, because we have the same state rules with our adult ed as we do our federal rules. So when we put these rules into place, we put our state rules into place for our adult ed, we use the same guidelines as we do our feds. And so we can't take these funds that we put forth for adult ed and say, oh, we're going to now pay for these materials that we used to pay with this other grant. That's not the intent of this. Now, the intent is always to pay for adult education, and that's fine. That's our goal, but it's a supplement grant. So that's important to recognize. So supplementing would be presumed in these situations. So federal funds used to provide services that were supported by state or local funds in the prior year. We can't come in and say, oh, we're now going to use adult ed funds for those ones. So if you used federal funds to support a program last year, you can't then now use adult ed to support that wholly. Now there is some exceptions to those rules. If you say you had a grant and now you have adult education and you were paying TABE with that, but now you're paying TABE with adult education, you're using with adult ed students, that's fine. So there are some things that adult ed can pay for that you were paying for with another grant, but the intent is not to come in and move those funds around. Federal funds used to provide services the state or local agencies is required to make available under other federal or state or local laws. So that's just another way of saying, hey, again, don't take those other funds away. And recording again. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, not a problem. Okay, so then it has to be authorized. It has to be authorized under all of the guidance that you see, the regulations and the laws that authorize us to pay for such a thing. And it has to be okayed by the office, especially on bigger purchases. For example, if you were to put a computer on your budget and we okay your budget, it doesn't mean that you're okay to spend it. It means that we've okayed your budget. You really have to get authorization to expend certain things like a computer so that we can make sure that it does fall into the state and local regulations and laws, and that we have the justification on hand so that when we do come out and do a monitoring, we have that justification, you have that justification, and more importantly, if the feds do the monitoring, the feds have that justification, so that we don't have to go back to your programs and say, well, you know, Amy just talked, so oops, Amy, I'm sorry, the feds have said we don't have enough justification. Now we have to reverse that $1,000 we okayed. You know, you now are liable for that. So we really do have to make sure that it's authorized, and we need to make sure that it's okayed in the AE office, that those expenditures are within the guidance or within the laws and regulations. So those are important things. And then make sure that it's adequately documented, which is what I just said. We have to make sure that there's justification on file. So it can be done through an email. It can be, that's the most appropriate thing, is through an email. I mean, you can send an email. I don't know why you would. I mean, it's the 21st century, but you can, if you'd like to snail mail it. I mean, that's fine. But email's the most appropriate, so that we can ask additional questions and follow-up questions, and then get the most approval. And that way we can keep it in your file. And also we have it, you have it, and all that good stuff. And you have our okay for your files for when we do come out and monitor. So reasonable and necessary means that the practical aspects of it is the expenses are targeted to be valid programmatic or administrative considerations. Are they? Do you have the capacity to use what you're purchasing? So that's a big one. A lot of people will order tabs, and they want to order like 500 tabs. That's fine if you're a program that's going to use 500 tabs in the amount of time that you're purchasing them. We may make you allocate them if you're purchasing that many tabs. If you're a small program that works with 20 students a year, it would not be appropriate for you to order 500 tabs. So you have to think of the capacity in which you're using that purchase. And then if you're asked to defend your purchase, how would you do that? That's a question that you always really need to ask yourself. Can I prove it? And is it a fair rate? So those are things that we ask a lot of. Oh, that's the next question. I'm sorry. Oh no, that's on the screen. I'm getting confused by the two screens. Do you have the capacity to use it? Is it a fair rate? Can I prove it? Can I justify it? Can I defend the purchase? How would I do that? How would I defend it if I needed to, especially if it came in and monitor it? And then again, if the feds asked to see it and monitor it, how would you defend that purchase? A lot of times the feds think of this as the red face test. If we asked you questions, would it embarrass you to have that answered? So if we asked you why you did what you did, would it cause a red face in that one? And then the practical aspects of necessary. Do I really need this? Is it surplus? Is it lease versus purchase? That's a big one. Is there an existing resource that I already have, or do I really need to purchase this one? Is this the minimum amount required to meet my program's needs, or am I purchasing way more? To what extent is the expenses allocable to the grant? So that's also another one, big one, an allocation, and then we're going into allocation next. So can charges only in proportion to the value or benefits received by the program? So an example, states purchase a large copier to use 50% in adult ed and 50% in a state program. Can charges only half the cost of federal funds? You can only charge 50% to the adult ed, and 50% would have to go to the other program. There are two methods of allocating costs. There's direct costs and there's indirect cost allocation. So direct cost, and if I'm going too fast, please let me know. Direct costs are those costs that can be identified specifically for the objective of meeting the federal award. So it's internal or external funding activities that are directly assigned to the activities related to this award. So direct costs may not be recovered or re-recovered. They can't be direct costs and indirect costs. That's important. You can't charge something as direct and then pay for it as indirect as well. So some examples of direct instruction on our grant, we have direct instruction, and then we have admin. And direct instruction is salary, wages, fringe benefits, travel, rent for direct instruction, not administrative, and then materials like textbooks and software. So those are all examples of direct instruction to the grant. So there's a big difference between direct instruction and direct admin, but these are all direct costs to the grant. So indirect costs. Indirect costs, some of you have it and some of you do not. And indirect are those that costs incurred for common or joint purposes that benefit more than one cost objective on your grants. So these are examples such as a supervisor's salary, wages, or fringe benefits, human resources functions, computer hardware, facilities costs, maintenance. Those are all indirect costs. Some of you guys have an indirect cost, and I don't know if all of you on here, no, not everybody on here does. So if you have an indirect cost, these are some examples of what an indirect cost would look like. And you do not necessarily have to, you don't have to put those on your forms that you submit to us. Indirect costs are they're put into a different system. They're not, we don't, when you turn in your stuff, you only turn in your admin and your direct costs. That's the stuff that we want to see every month. That's what we approve every month. So direct versus indirect. Expenses that directly affect the program. So they are direct costs. So again, TABE, direct instruction, rent for classrooms. Indirect are expenses that do not have a direct effect on the program. So supplies for the office, rent for the manager space, salary, those are indirect. So any questions on direct versus indirect before we move on? Perfect. So in the adult ed world, there is a cap on indirect unless it's a restricted indirect. And I think we go into restricted indirect in just a minute. I think. I don't remember if I go into those slides or not. Cost allowability. Oh, I forgot to take this out because I was putting people in Zoom rooms. So I apologize. So I'm going to skip over this one. So travel requirements. That's a little challenge. We'll skip that little challenge. Travel requirements. It's important when you're doing travel that there are some travel requirements that must go on your grant. Travel to annual conferences and program coordinator meetings are required. That's part of the travel, or that's part of the grant. I know it's a little tough right now with COVID and all that good stuff. We are looking at our program coordinator meeting being in person unless things change. And then our conference, we're looking at a hybrid conference. So far, that's the plan. So, but these are required for professional development on our grant, part of the grant agreement. Our per diem will not be reimbursed above the state per diem rate. So you may have a per diem rate in your organization that is higher, and that's fine. You can pay your individuals higher than that, but you cannot be reimbursed higher than what the state is offering. So some of that would have to be on your organization if you pay them higher. Out of state travel requires approval. If out of state travel is not approved by our office, we cannot reimburse it. There is a travel approval form on our website. And there is, we ask that you are, that other grants or other things like your program or other stuff are going to pitch in for travel. So we ask that there is some kind of match when it comes to travel. But per diem will not be reimbursed per the federal, above the federal per diem rate for out of state travel. So that's like going to conferences and stuff. And it has to be related to adult ed. You can't say, hey, we're going out of state to go to Hawaii for vacation. Can adult ed pay for that? No, they cannot. Or we're going to go to a veterans conference. Well, that's great. And I hope you learn a lot, but that's not adult education, that's veterans. So just make sure that when you do approach us that it has to do with adult ed. That's a big one. Does anybody have any questions on travel?
Wendy, I just have one additional thing just to remind folks that
Sure.
this is Root, by the way, but just to remind folks that we cannot reimburse for tips. Can't reimburse for tips for cabs or Lyft or even food. So that's not allowable.
Thank you. Or taxes, right, Root?
And taxes are, yeah, taxes
Thank
are
you.
not allowed either.
Thank you. So taxes and tips, just remember that when it's coming up to any kind of travel. Taxes and tips are not reimbursable.
Hey, Wendy, I might have already missed this. So the travel for the program coordinator, is it a direct cost or indirect cost?
It is a admin cost because it is so it's a direct cost, but it's on your admin. So on our two columns, we have admin and we have direct instruction. It is a direct cost, but it's an admin cost. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, administrative cost limits. So this one is specific to adult education. This is no other grants. This is adult ed only. So other grants may have an administrative cost limit. They may have something with admin. This is specific to administration on adult ed. And administration on adult ed, there is a rule in there that says not more than 5%. There is a 5% cap on adult ed admin. So on your direct administration, there, if you look at your form, there's direct administration and direct instruction. Not more than 5% of your total grant. This is including your indirect charges. The total at the bottom cannot be more than 5% of your grant. Also written into regulation, and we're pretty lenient about it, is in cases where 5% is too restrictive. Admin cost limits may be negotiated with to an adequate level of funding with our office for those non-instructional purposes. Now we know that there is some extra admin that has to be done in your work. There is that travel that has to go under there for program coordinators and for the conferences. There is the professional development that has to go under there. So we know that 5% can be, we have little grants that can be very restrictive. So we're pretty lenient about that. However, when you're taking into effect your indirect costs and your admin, we will not go over 20% of your grant being used for indirect and admin. We are very, very careful about that because the whole intent of adult education is to pay for teachers. That's the intent. So we try very hard to use your grant for direct instruction and anything we need for teachers and students. So just be cognizant of that. Oh, is any questions on that before I move on? Okay, that one can get a little sticky sometimes. Creating an annual budget. So cost allocation are those items that cross over the fiscal year. Remember, they must be allocated even on your budget. So when you're looking at purchasing publishers like Aztec or something like that, Essential Education or any of those, remember you need to allocate those. So if they're going to cost $5,000 and you're only going to pay for 6 months, you need to only put $2,500 on your budget. But don't forget the next year's budget. You have $2,500 sitting there that you need to pay for and budget for, and possibly budget for the next one if you're going to use that too. So then you're going to have to put $5,000 on your next year's budget. Publishers, is it supplied or contractual charges? So this is a big one that we've ran into over and over and over again. Publishers like Essential Ed and Aztec, we keep putting them, everybody keeps putting them into contractual charges, and they're, even though you're signing a contract with them, it's not contractual, it is a supply. And so they need to go into the supply line. And of course, allocated and include them in the next year's budget. So I just want to keep reiterating that because that's an important one that we keep running into. So be specific on your budget so that we can see those breakdowns of where everything goes, so that we know that you're using some things. So do use like telephone and internet or Zoom for education, 3 seats. Essential Education and Reading Plus, 15 seats, so that we can help break that down and know what you're asking for when we do approve your budgets. Don't just use generic stuff like postage copies, softwares, etc., or classroom instructional materials such as textbooks. I get that there's some of that, and you can just use a generic one for like classroom instructional materials and lump some materials in there, because you're always going to have some overlap that's just some like miscellaneous stuff, but not all of your budget should go into that. You shouldn't take, you know, $5,000 and throw it in there and just say classroom instructional materials. You should say maybe you know, $500 goes to miscellaneous, and then $1,500 goes towards Zoom, and you know, $10 or you know, 100 whatever goes to TABE, and then something else goes to Essential Ed, so we can see the breakdown. So please be as specific as possible on your budgets. So now we're getting into administrative costs. So this is specific again to adult education, and we're looking at that first column, that admin cost, non-instructional, because that is specific to your grant. That is the direct instruction, the direct cost associated with your grant. These are activities that are considered administrative costs, and these are written into regulations. Planning. So that planning piece, and that's planning for your, that's not planning for instructors. This is planning for the big picture, the admin side of it. If you're planning, that should be administrative. Also, the administrative, such as carrying out the performance of accountability requirements. If you're putting stuff into the system and you're looking at reports and you're worried about the accountability and you're focusing on how to make your program more, you know, work better and all that other stuff, that's all administrative. And so you should be under administrative and putting your time there. Professional development, it doesn't matter who, what, when, where. It doesn't matter if you're a program coordinator or if you're a teacher. Professional development is all admin. That is a federal, I cannot change that. It is admin no matter what. So this is the one that teachers should be charging to admin is under professional development. And please remember that teachers have to have, full-time teachers, 12 hours of professional development per year. It's 12 or 9. Heidi, you're on the call. 12 or 9. And Amy, you're on the call. 12, I think. Yes, because program
12, 9.
coordinators are 16. What's
Yeah.
that?
12 and 16, right?
12 and 16, right?
Yeah, 12 and
Yes.
16, 9 was like for part-time.
9 is part-time. Thank you. So I knew there are 9 and 12 in there somewhere. So teachers, part-time teachers are 9 hours. They have to have some 9 hours. That's 9 hours of admin costs. Full-time teachers, there's at least 12 hours of admin costs. You know, your program coordinators, at least 16 hours, if not more, because they're program coordinators, unless you're putting them under another grant. So these are all admin costs. The other one is providing adult education services in alignment with workforce, including that co-enrollment with other Title I. So if you're working with Title I, or you're working with the Job Center, or you're trying to carry out those activities and provide that alignment, those are all admin. So be very careful with that and make sure that you're putting that under your admin as well. And then the last one under federal regulations is carrying out the one-stop partnership requirements, responsibilities, including contributions to infrastructure costs. The infrastructure cost is it's taken care of by us in the MOU. That is under our side. So we take care of that infrastructure cost under our, you know, at the state level. So that's something you don't have to worry about. But anytime you're carrying out the one-stop partner responsibilities, that is for your program coordinators under admin. Anything under admin. So this is a big one where we don't see people putting stuff under your admin, and they should be. And we will go back to you if there's 0 hours under admin and say, where are your admin costs? There are few exceptions that we don't ask for admin costs. Questions? Okay. Here's the restricted indirect. And so this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier. If you have an indirect cost rate, and some of you guys have indirect and you have negotiated your rate, let's say with the Navy, and the Navy gives you 42% indirect. The feds on our side won't negotiate that. They don't play that game so well. So we have what is called a restricted indirect cost rate. Indirect cost rates must be negotiated with the Department of Education or an entity that is able to negotiate restricted indirect rates. If a grantee does not have a restricted indirect, they are limited to 8% on our grants. And a lot of you guys have them negotiated with labor or the Navy or Department of somebody else, HES, Health and Social Services. And so you guys might have a higher indirect, but if it does not say specifically negotiated indirect, you are limited to 8%. So just be aware of that on our grants. So I have some scenarios for you. So anybody can shout out the answers. So XYZ AE program needs to purchase a new computer for their program coordinator's office. So here's the question for you. Is this an allowable cost?
Yes.
Yes.
It's approved.
It's allowable. It's not approved, it's allowable. It must be reasonable and necessary, but it is allowable. The computer is in the budget. Is it okay to go ahead and purchase the computer?
Need approval before.
No,
Why not?
It's not been approved yet.
No, large purchases must be approved through our office. Good job. Scenario number 2. The XYZ AE program is filling out their annual budget. They are purchasing Burlington English, which is like, if for those of you that do not know, Burlington English is Aztec, Essential Ed. It's one of those platforms where learners get online and learn. So questions. Should this be contractual or supply?
Supply.
Supply. Okay, so even though you're signing a contract, it is a supply cost, so it should be in the supplies. Scenario number, 3, I went to 2. Oh, I'm still, questions under Burlington English, so that's why it's scenario number 2. Let's do some math. The program purchases Burlington English at the beginning of October for $75 a seat. They are purchasing 10 seats for their students. How much is the total cost?
Only for October to.
No,
No.
there's 75 seats. They're purchasing 10 seats. Total cost. Total
$750.
$750. Okay. How much can be charged to this grant cycle? Somebody has to have a calculator.
That's worth.
Only for.
625.
Yes.
625?
Yes, they need to charge only for 8 months.
Okay, I'm going to show you how we got there. So 750 divided by 12 is 6,250 per month. October through July is 9 months. So therefore, 6,250 times 9 is 562.50. So 562.50 can be charged for this grant period. So that's how much can be charged. How much can go towards next program year?
$187.
Marisol's on
50 cents.
fire. So July through September is 3 months, 187.50. So that has to be allocated. So we have to allocate those funds and split them up. And then the end is just showing you 565.50 plus 187.50 equals 750. So you're getting the full money back. It just has to be allocated between those 2 grant periods. Scenario number 3. XYZ AB programs teachers are having a hard time determining between administrative and instructional costs or neither. So are the tasks admin or instructional? Sally is a math teacher, but today she's teaching science. Admin or instructional?
Instructional.
Instructional. XYZ AE program needs to purchase tape tests for pre and post testing. Admin or instructional?
Instructional.
Instructional. The heater went out and had to be repaired. Admin or instructional?
Admin.
Admin.
Neither.
Neither. That's an indirect cost. So that would be neither. Amber is the data entry clerk who works 10 hours per week inputting student data. She does not work with students. Admin, instructional, or neither?
Admin.
Admin.
Admin. John teaches reading. He attended a 1-hour webinar on reading strategies. Admin, instructional, or neither?
Admin. Professional development.
Professional development. Admin. Good job, Marisol. Rent that is allocated for the program coordinator's office.
Administration. Admin.
Admin.
Depends if they teach not.
Rent that's allocated for classrooms.
That's this one I have question about is admin or direct cost because the classroom they use for teach.
Correct.
And you say in the private PowerPoint they say is admin.
Okay, say it again, Marisol, the
Okay,
classrooms they use
Yes,
for teaching.
the classroom is, for me, is direct instruction because
Correct.
we teach in the
Correct.
class, we use for teach.
Correct.
But I understand in the previous PowerPoint, they say it's admin post. Maybe I wrong?
Not for, okay, so I'll go one more, just so classrooms are instructional. What about the CEO's office?
This is admin because this is space for administration.
Neither.
Neither. Okay, so let's talk about rent. So when you guys are paying rent, we ask for a floor plan and we ask for you to break it up and allocate the costs. And we ask for the square footage. So there are three things on that square footage. One is the program coordinator's office, which falls under admin. So that square footage we can pay under administrative costs. So not a problem. It's used for administration, program coordinator's office, or any kind of office space that is not used for students. So that space can be allocated for administrative services. The classrooms, the common areas, or the classroom areas, those areas can be used, or the testing areas, the TABE areas, all that good stuff can be used for instructional. These are places that students go. These are student spaces. The exception of this is if you're in a building with multiple spaces, like if you're in a building that you have 10 programs and there's a kitchen, a common kitchen and a common bathroom, we can't pay for the common kitchen and common bathroom. That won't go under our grant at all. Just be aware of that. But that's an indirect charge. But classrooms are all AE. So those are instructional costs. Those are directly related to our grant. In the same building, you have the CEO's office, right? Or the admin of the building. She's not directly related to, or she or he is not directly related to our grant, but they do multiple grants. They are not instructional time. They are not admin time. They are indirect. So they would be indirect charges. They are not part of our grant. You would use our indirect in order to pay for their services or their section of the grant. So that's how you split up that rent costs and allocate it on our grant. Any questions on that?
Yes. So it has to be by space. It can't be by space and time.
Has to be by space.
Okay.
So if you're, what do you mean by time?
So because we're a small program, and I'm sure this is applicable to many small programs, as a program coordinator, I deal a lot with the students. About 30% of my time is direct time with my students, and I do that in my office to do registrations, to do one-on-one testing, those types of things.
Yeah, okay, so that's a different story. So if you're using that office space, take your office, and it's not a program coordinator's office that you're using. This is my office. We only use this for us. No people are in here, right? Hardly ever. However, if 50% of the time we were using this as a testing facility, or 50% of this time we were using this for intake, now 50% of this time it's not an office. 50% of this time this is allocated for intake and testing. So now it's not necessarily time. I mean, it is, but it's allocated. So we don't allocate it by time, we allocate it by percentage of the amount of time you use that for that task. Does that make sense, Amy?
Okay, so let's just get really specific. So my office, 70% of the time, it's a programs coordinator's office. I'm doing admin in here.
Okay. So 70% of that time it is admin.
Right. And then the other 30%, I'm doing stuff with students in my office. So say my office is 15 by 15, then whatever that space is out of the rent, 30% is going to go to instructional and 70% is going to go to admin.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. That's a really good question. Any other questions on that? Okay, that's the end of my PowerPoint presentation. Do I have any other questions on admin costs or allocations or the difference between admin and instructional, which kind of throws people off, or anything? Negotiated admin, because that's a big one too. And now that we know why we have to do that.
I have a question.
Sure. Hi, Linda.
Hey, so as far as tracking the numbers for how much admin we do every week, it does seem to change. And for HR purposes, I don't know that, I mean, we can track it, but I was wondering, how would you like that submitted? Or do we have to submit that?
So when you submit for you guys, it's quarterly. When you submit your quarterly progress reports or your reimbursements, we help track your admin and the amount of time. It's important for you guys to keep, if you've negotiated 5%, 6%, 7%, to just be aware that you have to be cognizant that you don't need to go over that for your grant. Just be aware of that. But we also keep track of that in our office. And if you get close to that, if you get anywhere near that, we let you know, hey, here's where you're sitting on your admin. And we're pretty lenient about it. If you guys need some extra, that we will renegotiate your admin or we'll work with you on that. But be aware that we also have to watch our Fed threshold as well. But we do want you to just be cognizant of your admin time. Does that help?
Sure.
Any other questions? You have me, Root, and Donna all here at the same time. That's rare.
So Wendy, can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
So regarding what Wendy just, this is Ruth. And so what she went over is just try to keep track of your admin costs, because towards the end of the fiscal year, we do start sending reimbursements back because either you've gone over or some of the stuff can't be charged to it. Another thing to keep in mind is the amendment. The last amendment that's due for the fiscal year is,
March 1st.
Wendy, it's March 30th, right?
March 30th, yes.
No. So
March 31st, sorry.
March 31st. So you do have, even though our policy does say that it's 10% or 2,500, whichever one is greater, that you do have the capability of moving funds around, you still need to let us know, and we'll come back and say we approve or don't approve. Now, towards the end of the fiscal year, it's difficult to approve those because we need to start getting things closed out. We need to, we have our accounting office on top of us trying to get things closed out. So please don't wait till the last minute to try to, move these funds around. I just wanted to touch base on that. It's 10%, 2,500, but you still need to ask us, send us an email regarding that.
Yeah. And the one thing that I do want to say is that, the adult education grants, technically are 2-year grants. We get funding yearly and we release funding yearly. So we are technically under 2 grants at all times, and that's why we have rollover money. When we reconcile the year, if we have funding from the previous year, even though we released your funding at the beginning of the year, if we have funding that nobody has used, we always have that call for funding if you need extra funding type of situations for your grants. The one thing I can say is we do not approve fire sales, and those are the ones that in the last month of the grant, there is extreme, this fear of not being able to expend all of your funding for the grants. The feds have looked unfavorably of this the last couple of years, like last few years, and we get in extreme trouble for that. So one of the things that we have done is trying to squash the fire sales. We do not allow extreme funding this last couple months. If you need something, you need it, and we understand that. But the idea is not to expend all of your funds in June to expend out your grant. That money will roll over, and if you need it, it's there to ask for it. When we put out that, hey, do you need extra funding? We have it. If we don't have it, we can't do that. That's fine. I mean, it is what it is. But please be aware that we do not do that any longer. I don't know how to stress that any more than that. And it does not affect you negatively. We do not have a negative way of looking at anything on your grant as far as they did not expend all their funds, so it negatively affects your budget for the following year. It's not looked at when we do the budget. It's not looked at when we do the questionnaire that we send out. It's not something that we negatively look at all. It is negatively looked at if we do see people trying to fire sale at the end of the year. That is something that we negatively look at. So if you have questions about that, that's fine too. That's a habit we're trying to break. Questions?
I don't have a question, but I did want to share that it is helpful for me, being a visual person, if when you're doing the slides, if you could also just like list some of the examples, because I'm looking at your slide and like scribbling down some of the examples you gave.
Sure. That's a good one, Wanda. I talked a lot, so I have no idea what I said. But like I said, this is recorded, so I will send out the recording, and so you guys can look through it again if you'd like. I think I'm going to have it put into a YouTube, so it's easier to and have them put it together, because there was 2 recordings. I'm not sure why, but I'll put it into a YouTube so that you guys can easily access it. But you can definitely go back and look at it again, because I have no idea what examples I gave.
Thanks.
Sometimes I just rattle, I promise. And then the last slide, I just want to tell you is my information and Ruth's information. I'm just going to put that out there. You guys know how to get a hold of me. You guys know how to get a hold of Ruth, but I always like to just have it out there. And then of course our website. If you don't know our website, go to our website. That's where we have all of our forms and stuff like that, or information on GD and testing and transcripts and all that good stuff. So it's definitely there for you. Did I seriously, the recording stopped again? When did the recording stop?
No, I think so. It's fine. It's
Okay.
recording.
Okay, I think we recorded this. I'm gonna see.
It might be split up into 2 things, Wendy, but
Okay.
you're recording, don't worry.
Okay. Whew. All right, well, is there any more questions or anything that I can go over while you guys have me for the next couple of minutes?
Wendy, are you going to be sending the slideshow as well?
I can, yeah, I definitely can. It's there for you if you need it. Okay, if you guys have any questions, just reach out to us. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Myself, Ruth, Donna, that's what we're here for. And I appreciate your time. Thank you for taking an hour out of your time on a Tuesday morning.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank
See you
you,
in a minute.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thanks.